Curse of height and bad eyesight. All right, for most of my life, I dreamed of being a star. Many of you already know that. I talked about that a bit the last time I was up here for a sermon. Rock star, movie star, writer, director. There was even a time when I was a teenager when I dreamed of competing in the Olympics as a martial artist. Poor Andrea. I told her recently that she married a handsome young actor, but one day she's going to retire with a fat old pastor. But no matter what kind of a star I was aspiring to become, a lot remained the same. It always came packaged with awards, talk show appearances, my face on magazine covers, and a lot of people screaming my name. So whenever I read the story of Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry, that's the lens that I read it through. Jesus must have felt amazing because I would have felt amazing, but my personal lens might have been a little distorted. So, Palm Sunday, what's that? In the Christian calendar of events, Palm Sunday, today, represents the beginning of what many refer to as Holy Week, the week leading up to Easter. See, for the 3.5 years or so of Jesus' ministry, he had largely stuck to more rural areas, keeping a fairly low profile when he was in the bigger cities. He taught people, built relationships with his core group of followers, performed the signs and the wonders we've been talking about these last few weeks in this series on miracles. He started small, turning water into wine, but it builds, feeding the 5,000, walking on water, healing the sick, the blind, the crippled. By the time Jesus decided it was time to take it to the big city, a crowded Jerusalem at the beginning of a Passover week, word of what he had done beat him there. On a day packed with fulfilling Old Testament prophecies, Jesus rode into town on a borrowed donkey as people screamed his name and chanted, "Praise God, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord, hail to the King of Israel." They took palm branches in their cloaks and put them in his path so even the donkey he rode in on wouldn't have to touch the dirty ground. I would have been jazzed. I would have eaten it up. Yeah, I worked hard for this. I deserve this. This is my moment. Thankfully, Jesus wasn't as short-sighted as I am. Jesus knew they weren't there to see him. They didn't care about him. They cared about what he could do for them. They wanted to see a miracle. Jesus knew that he was going to say some hard truths they didn't want to hear. The miracles they were looking for were going to look like they weren't coming. And in just a few short days, the same voices that chanted, "Blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord," were going to chant, "Crucify him." It was probably bittersweet at best. The thought I want you to hold on to throughout our time today, and as we go about our lives this Holy Week, is this: you cannot build a real, sustainable, life-changing relationship with Jesus on faith in a miracle. You can only build it on faith in the miracle worker. No matter how big the miracle, no matter how much you want it, no matter how badly you need it, you cannot build a real, sustainable, life-changing relationship with Jesus on faith in a miracle. You can only build it on faith in the miracle worker. We're going to read John 12 through 19. The next day, the news that Jesus was on the way to Jerusalem swept through the city. A large crowd of Passover visitors took palm branches and went down the road to meet him. They shouted, "Praise God, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hail to the King of Israel." Jesus found a young donkey and rode in on it, fulfilling the prophecy that said, thank you. Much better. I should have looked first. I saw AJ doing the same thing a couple weeks ago. Jesus found the young donkey and rode in on it, fulfilling the prophecy that said, "Don't be afraid, people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming, riding on a donkey's colt." His disciples didn't understand at the time that this was a fulfillment of prophecy, but after Jesus entered into his glory, they remembered what had happened and realized that these things had been written about him. Many in the crowd had seen Jesus call Lazarus from the tomb, raising him from the dead, and they were telling others about it. That was the reason so many went out to meet him, because they had heard about this miraculous sign. Then the Pharisees said to each other, "There's nothing we can do. Look, everyone has gone after him." Jesus had performed several miracles at this point, but raising Lazarus from the dead was the banger that was really drawing in the crowds. I mentioned before that Jesus started small, but that was out the window at this point. So we're going to back up a little bit to get a little context. Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha, were a wealthy family that supported Jesus' ministry financially. And on top of that, they were his friends. They were prominent members of the community in Bethany, a somewhat bigger city, so this was no low-profile miracle. Jesus and his disciples weren't too far from Bethany when Martha, likely the older of the two sisters, sent word that Lazarus was very ill. Jesus told the disciples, "He'll be fine. This won't end in death," and he hung out for a couple more days. Then those 2 days passed, and Jesus told his disciples that their friend Lazarus should be dead by about now, so let's go check him out. By the time Jesus got there, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Martha met him on his way into town and told him that if he had been there, her brother would not have died. But she still believed in him. Faith in the miracle worker, not the miracle. Then Jesus sent her to go get Mary. John 11:32-35. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved and in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. This brings me to my first point. Whatever it is you're going through, Jesus is going through it with you. Whatever it is that you are going through, Jesus is going through it with you. If you are sick, he hurts with you. If you have lost someone, he mourns with you. Even though he sees the big picture in a way that we can't, even though he knows why you have to go through this, which we may never know on this side of eternity, Jesus weeps. He doesn't judge you for being scared or depressed, not having enough faith. He knows if there's a big fat miracle around the corner with your name on it, and he knows if there isn't. But right now, in this moment, your pain breaks his heart. And he just wants to wrap his arms around you and love you through it. Mary had no idea what was coming. No one did besides Jesus. So Jesus wept. There was a burial custom in Israel. Archaeological evidence tells us it lasted about 150 years around this time period, especially if you were wealthy enough to afford a family tomb, which Lazarus was. They didn't waste a lot of time after you died. They immediately took the body to the front room of the tomb, which is basically a nice cave carved out of stone. They anointed it with oils and perfumes and rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to let nature take its course and keep the stink in. About a year later, they would come back, roll the stone out of the way, gather up your bones, place them in a decorative box called an ossuary, mark it so they know who's in there, and put it on a shelf in the back room with the rest of your family's bones, leaving the front room open for the next family member. So why is that important? There's a great line early in A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, one of my favorite books. I read it every Christmas season. "There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate." I have heard many people over the years say they would love to see God raise someone from the dead today, because that would somehow be more miraculous. See, with our more advanced medicine and invasive burial practices, there is no mistaking coma for dead today. But let me set your mind at ease. If you are so sick that everyone is convinced you are dead, and they put you in a cave in the desert, wrap you up, and roll a stone over the entrance, leaving you trapped with no fresh air or water, if you are not dead now, you will be in 4 days. So there is no doubt that Lazarus was dead. John 11:38-44. Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this so that everyone here may believe that you sent me." When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." How could you not believe after that? And in fact, it goes on to say that many of them did believe, and the word spread, and still they turned on him. But this wasn't the first time in the Bible people witnessed a breathtaking miracle and then immediately rebelled against God. Officially, Jesus and his disciples were in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, just like pretty much everyone else. But nearly 2,000 years earlier, a large family referred to as the Israelites took refuge in Egypt during a severe famine. Over the following 400 years, the family grew exponentially into a community, and they were enslaved by the Egyptians. God called a man named Moses to lead these people out of Egypt and gave him the ability to perform amazing miracles in order to convince Pharaoh to let his people go. But these miracles were the opposite of Jesus' miracles. Jesus turned water into delicious wine. Moses turned water into undrinkable blood. Jesus fed the 5,000. Moses destroyed crops and livestock. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Moses called an angel to kill the firstborn son of every family in Egypt. But Moses gave the Israelites instructions to eat a special meal including lamb, and they were to brush the blood of the lamb on the top and the sides of the doors to their houses. Do you see it? Then the angel would pass over that house, sparing that family. Pharaoh finally broke down and told Moses to take his people and go. So Moses and as many as 2 or 3 million people just left in a hurry. Then Pharaoh, possibly in a rage over the loss of his own firstborn son, changed his mind and led his army after his former slaves. God separated the army from his people with a pillar of fire and empowered Moses to part the Red Sea, where they walked to freedom on dry ground. We don't know exactly what that looked like, but it had to have been mind-blowing. We're going to watch a clip from one of my favorite animated musicals, The Prince of Egypt. They did take a few creative liberties. Moses was much older at this point, but I think it shows the awe of the moment. And as a bonus, Moses was voiced by the late, great Val Kilmer, so go ahead and roll the clip.
With this staff, you shall do my wonders.
Cue Whitney and Mariah, There Will Be Miracles When You Believe. I love that movie. Highly suggested if you haven't seen it, and this is a great week to watch it. But again, how could you see something like that and not believe? How could you not be 100% committed for the rest of your life? Easy. Surprisingly easy. Disturbingly easy. What have you done for me lately? Easy. Which brings me to my second point. Today's troubles will always trump yesterday's triumphs. No matter how big or breathtaking or mind-blowing the miracle, today's troubles will always trump yesterday's triumphs. 2 months, not 2 years, 2 months later, after the parting of the Red Sea, the new nation of Israel found themselves in the desert at the foot of a mountain called Mount Sinai. Moses gathered the leaders, including his brother Aaron, who was his right-hand man through the events in Egypt, and he told them to wait while he went up to the mountain to talk to God. Moses was up there for 40 days getting instructions from God on how they were going to live with God and each other, but 40 days can feel like a long time. Exodus 32, 1 through 8. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives and your sons and your daughters are wearing and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioned it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So the next day, the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterwards, they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf." 2 months from the Red Sea and 40 days of silence in the desert to giving an inanimate object credit for their salvation. We've all done that. We're 4,000 years more sophisticated, so we think we're better. We're not. You pray to God to help you with your finances. He takes you from a period of debt to a period of plenty. Then you run into a few unexpected expenses. Things get a little scary. God seems a little quiet. And you look at that bank account and say, "These are the gods, Israel, who brought you up out of poverty." Or maybe he saved your marriage or even your life. But life goes on. New troubles arise. If God doesn't act when you want, the way you want, you look elsewhere. How quickly blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord turns to crucify him. The Israelites got through the sea, but there was still the desert. And if their faith was in the parting of the sea instead of the God who parted it, they were in for a world of trouble. And Lazarus eventually died again, for good this time in a physical sense. Those who loved him were scared again, hurt again, mourned again. And if their faith had been in his resurrection instead of the one who resurrected him, he may as well have never come out of that tomb. The Red Sea was parted and Lazarus was raised. The economy's still in the toilet. What good are a few extra years if those years don't lead to a real, sustainable, life-changing relationship with Jesus? The miracle may offer you a few extra years, but the miracle worker offers eternity. You may desperately need a miracle, and I pray you get it, because I believe the miracle worker still works miracles. But you need Jesus more. Today's message is kind of heavy. The days leading up to Easter, like the days leading up to the Passover, were dark. But I have good news, and the good news is my final point. It's a short one. But warning, it's a bit of a cliffhanger. You'll have to come back to hear Keith next week to hear at our Easter service how it plays out. But my final point is this: there's always one more miracle. For those who have placed their faith in Jesus, there is always one more miracle. And ladies and gentlemen, this next one's a doozy. Our band could come on up. We're going to have our prayer partners up here in just a few minutes, and if you need a miracle, they will pray with you. If you need Jesus, and everyone does, they'll pray with you for that too. I can't guarantee you'll get the miracle you're hoping for, but I can 100% guarantee the miracle worker.